Hi, this is Alex, and if you love music, well, you've come to the right place because we're all about albums. This is my 13th episode. Yes, lucky number 13. And if you notice, I'm not wearing the typical t-shirt from my record store. I'm actually wearing just a Love Turntable, Love Music t-shirt. And that's because today's episode is going to be a little different. Instead of talking about an album topic, we're actually just going to talk about what I am listening to on my turntable. So without further ado, what am I listening to? Well, first of all, I'm listening to this album here. And yes, this is one of my unknown album covers from the last video. This is Lord Huron, the 2021 release of their brand new album entitled Long Lost. Now, who is Lord Huron and what kind of music do they make? Well, a lot of people will call them alternative, or possibly what I call them is alternative folk. They most remind me of the band from the 70s called The Band, and I think that's their foundation. But I think there's a more modern twist, and you probably want to sprinkle in a little bit of Fleet Foxes, and I think then you get Lord Huron. Now, Lord Huron is a quartet, and its principal member is Ben Schneider. He writes the music, and he formed the band back in 2010 when he wrote some songs. Their first album came out in 2012 called Lonesome Dreams, which I listened to and I absolutely adored. This is their fourth release, and I could say all their prior albums are great. I really like Lord Huron, and this was one of my pre-orders, so I was very happy when I received it in the mail. This is an interesting album in that this album started as a live stream in December of 2020, and they had some sort of a host introduce the band, and then they would play some of their songs, and they would usually have in each episode maybe one new song from the album. And this is actually carried out in the album itself in that it seems that there's sort of a host who introduces them, much like you would see at the Grand Ole Opry, and then they would go into one of their songs. It's quite interesting and a little bit unique. But it doesn't matter if you like it or not. It's quirky, but the music is absolutely great. If you're a Lord Huron fan, you won't be disappointed. For those of you who don't know Lord Huron, they're really well worth a listen. What's interesting about this album is that on the back cover, they have indication that this album should be played without interruption from start to finish in the sequence that the artist made. And I have made that the statement several times on previous videos, how important that is, because that's what the artist or engineer wanted you to listen to, so might as well do it in the way that they intended. So what do I think about the sound quality? The sound quality is quite excellent. I'd give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. And the music is equally impressive, and I would also give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars for this album. So again, I highly recommend this new album by Lord Huron entitled Long Lost. The next album I'm listening to is by Sarah Jarosz. It's her latest album called Blue Heron Suite. This is another great album. I highly recommend it. Sarah Jarosz is an Americana artist. She is quite talented. She's a multi-instrumentalist, has a great voice, and writes her own music. All her albums are fantastic. Her first album came out when she was 18 years old. This work was actually commissioned by the Fresh Grass Foundation back in 2017. This album is inspired by frequent trips her family took to Port Aransas, which is on the Gulf Coast of Texas. This is not too far from where she grew up. So 2017 was a very difficult year for Sarah Jarosz. In the winter of 2016, her mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she was undergoing treatments in 2017. And also a Hurricane Harvey, hit Port Aransas along the Gulf Coast of Texas and destroyed much of the city in August of 2017. So this album basically reflects upon that. So Blue Heron Suite comes from the great blue heron that Sarah would see with her mom on early morning walks along the beach. And this was a stoic and calm bird. And she reflected on this bird and she thought that this was a good symbol for the family when she saw this bird. And so the blue heron represents for Sarah hope. Sarah released her first album in 2009 when she was 18 years old, and she got a lot of attention with this album. Her fourth album, called Undercurrent, won her 2 Grammy Awards. I would also like to say that her fifth recorded full-length album was World on the Ground. In 2020 it came out, and it won the Grammy Award for the Best Americana Album. I highly recommend that one as well. It is a wonderful album. So I give this album a 4 out of 5 stars for music, and I give it a 4.5 out of 5 for sound quality. So in summary, Blue Heron Suite I would call a calming album, an album that would lead you to reflection, as there are 4 interludes that allow you to reflect upon what you listen to and also reflect upon your own life. The next album I'm really excited about to share with you, and that is this album here. It's by an artist named Kishibashi, and it came out in 2021, and it's called Emigrant. This album by Kishibashi, which is really a pseudonym for artist Kaoru Ishibashi, and he is a Japanese American born here in the States in Seattle, Washington, and he grew up in Norfolk, Virginia. He studied musical scoring for film at Berklee College of Music and became a world-renowned violinist. He is a multi-instrumentalist. He toured as a violinist with Regina Spektor, as well as the indie rock band of Montreal. This album, by its name, Emigrant, is a album that is based upon interviews that he did with Japanese Americans who were either detainees within the internment camps during World War II or their descendants. Now, for those of you who don't know, at the end of 1941, the U.S. entered World War II after the Pearl Harbor attack, and in 1942, along the west coast of both the United States and Canada, many Japanese Americans were interned in these camps due to fear of possibly espionage or working against the U.S. government in time of war. The Kishibashi website talks about this album as a companion piece to the prior album, which also dealt with this topic of the internment of these Japanese Americans, and this album is called Omiyari. The album is not only introspective, but has a wonderful, uplifting sound, which I think talks about hope and improvement in the world, and I think it's reflected in the sound, and I think you'd really, really enjoy this album. This is one of the albums I picked up by hearing one of his songs on a recommendation from the title site, and I loved the song and kept researching and found that Ishibashi has had several prior albums. I'm kind of embarrassed that I didn't know about this artist sooner, but I highly recommend this artist. If you haven't listened to this, it is phenomenal. I guarantee you're going to love it. So what do I give this? Musically, I give this a really high mark at 4.5 out of 5 stars. However, sonically, the album has a lot of hash in the background. I'd give it a 3 out of 5 stars. I have listened to it streaming on the Tidal service, and it's much cleaner, so I'd probably up the sound to probably 3.5 out of 5 stars. But listen, don't go on the sound, go on the music quality, and the music quality here is excellent. I don't think you'll be disappointed. So that's Kishibashi with Emigrant as one of my other albums in high rotation. And the fourth and final album that's on my turntable right now is an oldie but a goodie. It's from 1968. This is the second album by Blood, Sweat, and Tears, which is a self-titled album. The reason I'm talking about this album not being really nostalgic is that this album was just re-released by Mobile Fidelity. Now, for those of you who don't know, Mobile Fidelity has been around quite a long time, and they take analog tapes, the original masters, and then they recut the albums, and usually the sound quality is second to none. And they did here another master recording, but this, if you can see here, is the one-step process. Now, I spoke about one step before, but I'll go into it a little bit more in depth. What makes one step so important or so valuable to the audiophile community. So the idea is that typically there are 3 steps in producing the stamper. Typically, first from the lacquer, you make the mother, which then becomes the father, and then you get the stamper, and then the stamper makes the vinyl record. Well, this process is cut by 2 steps, so it's 1 step only. From the lacquer, you get a negative impression, and from this negative impression, you press the albums. And so this is called 1 step because there's only 1 step between the lacquer and the final reproduction. The vinyl that they use is top notch and the album is dead quiet. Now, not only is this album audiophile quality, it's in of itself a fantastic record. This album won the Grammy Award for the Best Album of the Year, and although it's a great album, it beat out that year, believe it or not, Abbey Road by the Beatles, which I don't agree with. I think Abbey Road is a better album than this album, but nonetheless, this is a great album. It had 3 top hits on this album, including You've Made Me So Very Happy, Spinning Wheel, and the 3rd song, And When I Die. Now, this band was formed in the mid-60s by Al Cooper and some of his musician friends. They formed a band that grew into 8 members. Their first album was called The Child is the Father to the Man, and this was a fabulous record. And what happened was there was some disagreement in the band, which there are typically in the band, especially with 8 members. And Al Cooper left, as well as about half the musicians. The core that were left behind, they decided to continue, and they got many great musicians with them, but they had a hole. They did not have a lead vocalist. Now, interesting, they first thought that they would take Alex Chilton, who had just left the Box Tops, prior to him forming Big Star, but obviously they didn't go with Alex Chilton. They thought about Stephen Stills from Buffalo Springfield. They did not go with him either. They even thought of a female, Laura Nyro, to be their lead vocalist, but they decided to go with a Canadian-born artist named David Clayton Thomas. This was a suggestion by the artist Judy Collins given to the band, and they were very lucky that she did. He was a fabulous singer. This album, again, I would give 4.5 stars out of 5 for music quality, and I give this my highest 5-star rating for sound quality. Now, let me just show you a little bit more about this album, the One Step album. It does cost more money, but here's the album cover. It has gold emboss. It comes in this beautiful leather box. It's numbered here in the backs with gold foil, so that's nice. Now, when I open up the box, it has first this nice felt foam to protect the album. It has a couple of cool photos of the band that you usually don't get. It talks about here what One Step is and shows you not only verbally but by picture. They include here the album cover, the back cover, and the pictures with liner notes so you don't lose out on that. And finally, you get this album, and it is in 45, so it's a 2-disc set. So again, if your turntable doesn't support 45, be forewarned, but you can get this album in 33. It is still available out there. But this album is beautifully pressed, and it comes in this nice paper to protect the album. The album is super flat and super quiet. Again, if you want a great sounding album, any of the One Step albums by Mobile Fidelity are fabulous, so you should check it out. Forewarn you, they are quite expensive, and in the secondary market, even more so. And now for last video's unknown album. The first unknown album is the first album I showed you on today's video that I'm listening to quite a bit, Lord Huron, Long Lost. Came out 2 weeks ago, so brand new. Highly recommend the album. I'm not going to say anything more about this one. The second unknown album is Kishibashi's album Omiyari. So this is the album that came out prior to the Immigrant album, which I'm playing quite a bit. This is a fabulous record. You might actually enjoy this record more than Immigrant. Immigrant is a little bit more folk sounding, which I love, but you may like this album. It's slightly more pop sounding. Still, it's got that upbeat sound. If you want to get a comparison to who Kishibashi is most like, I would say Andrew Bird. For those of you out there who love Andrew Bird, you're going to love Kishibashi. He does use loops. He does extraneous noises. He plays the violin just like Andrew Bird and makes a lot of great music. Again, this album deals with the internment of the Japanese Americans at the start of World War II in 1942. And very interesting and thought-provoking album. Highly recommend that album as well. And now for this video's unknown album, the first unknown album. Okay, great. Hope you got that one. The second unknown album. Okay. As always, if you know the answer to either one of these unknown albums, let me know in the comment sections below and I'll let you know if you're correct. As always, this is Alex with All About Albums. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. And remember, keep them spinning.